they had a piano, and I just started playing on it because I didn't have a piano at my house at the time. I, was able to figure out songs all by myself. And I was very young. I think I was probably 5 at the most. I fell in love immediately. I was like, I have to do this. And music's been a part of my life ever since that moment.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast. I am your host, Dan Krikorian. Each episode we feature a special guest from all walks of life, and we ask them to explore the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the trials and the triumphs of their chosen field. Writers, musicians, coaches, business owners, athletes, and everything in between. We peel back the curtain to hear their stories, to walk their paths, to find out how they breathe life into their beautiful work. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time if this is your first episode you're tuning in. We're really glad to have you. Today's guest is Deb Tala, and Deb is a fantastic vocalist, singer, musician, all-around great person, and she has done so much for my career personally, and she has done so much in her career as a musician, as you guys will hear in just a minute. Before we get into Deb's story, I wanted to give a couple of quick announcements. For those that are joining us, this is the going to be the last episode of what's been a sort of mini-series within the podcast, which is called, Grandeur mini-series. So my 5th record, Grandeur, came out just a few weeks back on January the 18th, and things are going well with the record. And the last 5 episodes have featured various folks who were very instrumental, no pun intended, to the making of the album. And so Deb is kind of wrapping up that mini-series, and it's been a lot of fun. So if you go back through January, you can hear all of the folks that were deeply involved in making the record and all that they've done, and hear what they've accomplished in their careers outside of working on Grandeur with me. If you are interested in Grandeur, you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere where music is streamed or downloaded. And love it if you went to one of those sites, and if it's iTunes and you feel so obliged to download it or to leave a review, that'd be very helpful. The early reviews coming in on the record have been very, very kind, and we're excited about where things are going. We have a lot of shows and things that are planned as we run into the spring and definitely the summer. So please head to the website, Dan Krikorian, DanKrikorian.com, or you can go to the beautifulworkpodcast.com. They both take you to the same spot. You can find out more about the album, as well as more about all of these podcasts and the wonderful folks who have gone in the past episodes. And you can sign up for our newsletter on there as well. And that's the best way to keep in touch with everything going on. All right, that's it for this week announcement-wise. Excited to bring you Deb's story. So without further ado, let's get to the show. Deb Tala was raised in a small town in Texas, just on the edge of Dallas County. At 5 years old, Deb went to a friend's house to play and discovered a piano in the living room. By the time her mom had picked her up to go home later that day, Deb had already figured out the melodies to 3 songs. She later started classical piano lessons and performed in competitions and festivals until the age of 15. She wrote her first song, Oh Someday, Vacation Day, at age 9, and Deb played piano and sang backup with her mom in church, as well as harmonies with every song on the radio. Fast forward a few years, and Deb found herself studying music at the University of North Texas in Denton. She studied jazz vocals in all three of the school's jazz vocal ensembles, and she also studied and worked with prominent session singers while attending school. Later, Deb moved to Dallas and played in a few bands before landing a gig singing with Sarah Hickman, who was signed to Elektra Records shortly after. Deb and Sarah co-wrote a song that became the first single from Sarah's debut with Elektra. The song, "I Couldn't Help Myself," received radio airplay and reached number 14 on Billboard's adult contemporary charts. Deb toured with Sarah, singing and playing keyboards during that time, with highlights including performances on Austin City Limits and The Tonight Show, as well as opening for Eric Johnson and Billy Bragg. Not long afterwards, Deb moved to Los Angeles, where she honed her songwriting and collaborating skills and has worked with many, many artists with both vocals, piano, keyboards, and accordion. Deb is here today to share her life in music, how to be a professional, and that time she visited LA for a week and stayed for 20 years. Okay, I am joined this morning by Deb Tala. Deb, as I know you, thanks so much for joining the Beautiful Work podcast this morning.
Oh, I'm so happy to be talking with you.
Thank you, Deb. Well, you're from Texas, correct, originally?
Yes. I was born in Dallas.
So born in Dallas, are you at all a Dallas Cowboys or sports fan of the Dallas area?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think most people in Texas are, but, and I grew up, being a Cowboys fan, but okay. I don't pay any attention to sports at all anymore. Not at all. There are so many other things to do. Sport, and I know that probably, is painful to hear, but, I just.
No, not at all.
There's only so much time in life. So you have to pick and choose. And that's something I don't do. So.
Yeah. The reason I asked is just because I think Dallas and Texas has this reputation for being such a huge football state, and everybody gets into the football games. And so was that your experience growing up in Dallas, being a part of that?
Yes. And it's funny that you asked this. I actually was in marching band for a total of 7 years. I started in 8th grade and I marched through my first 2 years in college. And I actually marched in a Dallas Cowboys football game. So I have done that. Been there.
That's fun.
So yeah, I think that's probably what was the demise of my interest in sports, though, because I have attended, so many football games for so long, and then, kind of just went off in a different direction.
Yeah, I can see that. If you're not someone that's playing or into it, and then it's just kind of forced all the time, right. You get a little tired of it.
Right. I mean, I would much rather be out, playing something outside with people who I love, and, and having a good time, or hiking, or doing something active myself, rather than just passively watching. I think it's much more fun to be involved in something. So.
Sure. Well, let's start talking about your career and your life in music. And maybe you could start from the beginning, or I'll ask you from the beginning. What was music like in and around your household growing up?
Interesting. Well, I grew up, going to church. And so some of my earliest memories of music are from being in church and singing. And my mother's a singer, and she played a little bit of piano. Not a lot, but she did play a little bit. And my dad played guitar a little bit also. So, there was always that interest in music in my family, but not any, concentration as far as really studying it. But it was always there. And then, when I had an opportunity to actually sit and play on an instrument, I discovered that, hey, this is for me. And I discovered that at a very, very young age.
And what was it? Do you remember about music that just drew you in so much?
Well, I went to a friend's house where there was a get together. I think my mom and dad might have been playing cards with some friends of theirs, and the kids were all left to play with each other, and they had a piano, and I just started playing on it because I didn't have a piano at my house at the time. And I, was able to figure out songs all by myself. And so and I was very young. I think I was probably 5 at the most. And so, I'm also a teacher. I teach piano. And so now that I teach kids, I realize, how kind of prophetic that can be. When you see a kid who can pick out melodies on a piano, that they're demonstrating that they've already got a developed ear. So that's kind of what happened. And I fell in love immediately. I was like, I have to do this. And I really have always, music's been a part of my life ever since that moment.
That's a special, I guess, moment for you to remember and be able to think back on. And it's interesting hearing you talk about that. And you mentioned about your ability to sort of just figure out songs and hear things in songs from a young age. And you and I have worked together on my past 3 records, and it's always fun working with you in the studio. One, because you're just awesome at what you do, but then I can always see it on your face when you get excited about figuring out how to layer a melody or a harmony. And there's this light that goes off where you're like, I got it. Yeah. And then you run back to the studio with Sean, and it sounds like you've been doing that your whole life.
Yeah. Well, it's like a lightning bolt, I'll hear it and I'll know, oh, this is it. And, and sometimes it's just awful. That happens sometimes, but you have to try. If you hear it in your head, that's your muse is saying, you've got to try this because, it's coming through. And, it's a blast. I love doing that stuff.
I'm always excited the day that you come to do the vocals with the album, because it just adds such a layer that sometimes I don't hear, I don't think about. And then it's fun hearing you work and then the end result. And it is like a lightning bolt, I just, I have so much fun seeing you go back and forth and hearing the end result. Now you went to North Texas and studied jazz vocals. Am I correct?
Yes, I did. I mean, not, I guess officially, that wasn't my part of my degree plan.
Okay.
But that's where my heart and my head was. So I ended up auditioning over the time that I was there for all 3 different vocal ensembles that they had at the school at the time, and was able to get into each one, successfully. So I learned a lot. Anytime you're growing and changing and working with other people, there can be some challenges, with different personalities and all that. But it's such a good experience and life lesson. It teaches you some skills for, the future, for dealing with different people and different personalities and different tastes and styles and all these different things. So.
Sure. And you've worked with numerous, many, many, many people in your career. And is there anybody that you can remember that, or I'm sure there are a few, but that really stuck out as being just almost on another level musically that you've worked with?
Definitely. I worked with an artist named Circe Link. for several years in LA up until the time that I moved away. And she's just phenomenal. She's such a prolific songwriter and just such a solid musician. You know, she's and her partner that she works with, he's her musical director. His name is Christian Nesmith, and they are both a tour de force. They really are. They are something else. They made me rise to the occasion, which I always liked that over the course of the years. I always loved when I worked with people who challenged me musically. And, you know, if I was the weak link, then that meant I was working with some pretty, you know, intense musicians, and that's how you learn. That's how you learn. So it's great.
And how did you come to work with them?
Well, when I moved to Los Angeles, I started going to a coffee house in Hollywood. It was called Highland Grounds, and they had an open mic every Wednesday, and I went pretty regularly, and that's how I met most of my best friends in Los Angeles. And just, you know, developing these friendships and contacts over several years. That's how these things happen. But they at one point had attended the same, and mutual friends. And then I heard that she needed a singer, and I was asked to go audition, and it went really well. And that's just how it happened. So, so much of it is, you know, just being in the right place at the right time, always putting yourself, you know, out there, even when it's, you know, a new place and it's hard to do.
Right.
You just have to kind of go out there and just meet people.
Now, someone else that you worked with in the past that has had some success over the course of a career is Sarah Hickman.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And you know, I didn't know this until, you know, going through your bio and getting ready for the podcast, but that you co-wrote one of her, if not her biggest song, I Couldn't Help Myself.
Yes.
And so tell me about that and how that all came about.
Well, that was an interesting thing. That's the only song that she and I had written. That was the very first song. I think we've written one since, but that was the only one. It ended up being the single on her album. So it was, you know, a chance situation. She had a bit of a chorus, and she needed some help getting it done. And her A&R person loved it, and that was what happened. So I met Sarah. She also went to North Texas State University. Okay. And so we knew several of the same people. And, you know, I ended up jumping up on stage with her one night when she was singing, because I knew the parts. I knew a harmony to sing along on one of her songs, and I was a fan of her music. And I sang harmonies with her just on that one song, and she invited me to do it again, and then I was singing with her regularly. And then she ended up getting signed to Elektra, and just another case of just kind of being in the right place at the right time, and just doing what you love, and just, you know, letting these gifts happen.
Right.
So.
And that's an interesting story, that, you know, it was the single, and that's a pretty big break for you early on to have that song. And then I know you went on and you toured with her a little bit, and did you guys play on, I think, Austin City Limits and The Tonight Show, things like that?
Yes. Yes, we did. We toured on our own for a few months, you know, and off and on for a couple of years. And then we also were so fortunate we got to open for Eric Johnson, the Austin-based guitarist who's just phenomenal. And we got to do that for, I don't know, maybe a month and a half. And it was just a great leg of our tour. And we got to perform in England with Billy Bragg. So that was, it was great too. So.
Yeah. Now, so you tour with her and go through all that. And then at that point, then where are you at when you guys are finished? Then, because at some point then you moved to LA. So was a decision to, so tell us about that.
Well, what happened was Sarah was in Los Angeles in Hollywood recording her album, her debut album for Elektra. And she called me up one day. I was working in Dallas and she said, I'm lonely. Will you come out and hang out with me while I'm recording? And I was like, sure. So I went, only planned to go for 1 week. And I ended up extending my stay. I stayed for 2 weeks. I really was, bitten by that energy that LA has. And I think, it was just at a time in my life when I was looking for taking a chance and changing and, stepping out of fear and just kind of going for it. It's a hard thing to do when you're younger sometimes. And then at the same time, it can be an easy thing to do because you don't have as much perspective when you're younger. So you'll take chances. So that's what happened. I was kind of concurred at the same time. I did my tour with her and then I moved to LA and then I continued to work with her when she came to LA to do shows. But then she ended up having to get a different background singer who was local to, at that point, she had moved to Austin. So.
And then you stayed in LA?
Yes, I did.
And how long? So, because, as I've known you, you were in LA most of your career, and then I know you've moved since, but how long were you out here?
I was in LA for 24 years. I had planned to live there for 5.
Wow. Well, you first planned to go for a week.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, but the people who I met is really what kept me there. It was the musicians and the friends that I made.
Sure.
And that's really what kept me there for so long. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And I had always wondered, how you'd gotten out here, and I know you've been from Texas, and so that's a great story. The other thing that's interesting,
right.
When you move out here, so your official full name is Deborah Talasic, correct?
Talasic, yes.
Talasic, yes. Sorry, excuse me.
Yes, that's okay. And that is exactly why I go ahead and say it.
Perfect. Why you shortened it, right?
Right. I did. I lopped off the last 3 letters of my last name. My last name is Czech, and my entire childhood it was botched, misspelled, mispronounced, and all that, And so, and people could never remember it. They couldn't remember it. They couldn't say it. They couldn't spell it. And just by taking off those last 3 letters, it really helped. Although people mispronounce just Tala also, they pronounce it Tala.
Okay.
So it's like it still backfired. It doesn't really matter. But they could remember it and they could spell it at least.
Sure. So. Now, and this is an interesting topic because, I've kind of grappled with this, and I did earlier on in my career with my last name, Krikorian, being continually messed up as well. So I totally get the sentiment. And when I was first starting out, my middle name is Paul, and I thought about my stage name or musical name just going by Daniel Paul. And it's shorter and kind of more succinct, and it is my name. But I don't know why, but for every reason, I just decided to stick with Krikorian. But I've always thought, what if I shortened it or done it differently? And so for you, I don't know, did it change, having that shortened name, did it change anything about how you thought about, your career or music, or did it make you feel better about having a shortened name, like it almost wasn't you per se?
It's kind of a weird grab bag there. I think I've always, it's always been a point of contention with me, my name. I actually like my real last name, Talasic. It's different. Just like Krikorian. You don't hear that every day.
True.
And I think also part of it was wrapped up in, the fact that I was raised in a small town in Texas, and there weren't that many people that had really unusual last names. If I remember, it just doesn't seem like, I remember, Nelson and, a variety of different kinds of names, but just not, I don't know why. I don't know. It's just really strange. Sure. And then, my nickname when I was a kid was Debbie. Well, Debbie is a polarizing name. I've come to find out. People either are fine with it or they really don't like it at all. And so that's how I became Deb. And I didn't even do that. That's just what other people did. They started calling me Deb. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, I've thought about leaving Tala behind, but at this point, they're all a part of me. When I worked with Sarah, it was under the name Debbie Talasic. So if you look up the song I wrote with her, I think MCA Publishing still has it as Debbie Talasic.
Yes.
ASCAP, they know all my names. So, that's just, it's just an unusual thing. So,
yeah,
I'm just I'm all those things. And, I also, because of the fact that I'm a teacher and I teach kids, and when I first got into teaching, and I was also first, really going into my songwriting, I was expressing myself and expressing some emotions and some things that might be uncomfortable for people to hear or think about. And I really wanted a separation from my business of teaching with my business or my love of songwriting. And so as a songwriter, I was Deb Tala. And as a teacher, I was Debbie Talasic. And it actually worked pretty well for a while until everything became very easy to find on Google. So
right.
Yeah.
But you bring up a really that's just a really interesting point, and I still think about that, and I've even thought about after potentially having a side project with a different name to kind of give some separation between what I've done and what I want to do, and it sounds like you have a little bit of that as well.
Absolutely. And I've thought about that too for, any upcoming thing that I want to release. I wonder, how am I going to approach that? I don't know yet. I really don't.
Yeah. Another guest I had on here, Andrew Herringer, was, he has like a moniker that he goes by, and he talked about how he likes it because he feels like because art can be so personal, and like songs are so personal. And so when it's your name, it sometimes get confusing. Like, well, the song isn't me or the art isn't me, but it's my name, and having a different name kind of gives it like some separation. So, I'm interested to see what you do with it.
Yeah, I am too. I don't know what it'll be. It's that whole, the branding thing now too. It's like, everyone, whether you're a small, independent professional or a big company, that's all about that. And so it's kind of hard to figure that stuff out when it's just you by yourself, and how you want that. But I think it's good to try to figure that stuff out early. I think that's what I would tell younger artists at this point, try to figure that out.
Sure.
Try to stick with it, but it doesn't mean you can't change. It's never too late to change and try something different. So I'm anxious to see what kind of name you come up with. Me
too. I have no idea. I have some ideas floating around, and I'll let you know.
Well, this is one little thing about the name that's hysterical. Okay, so I married a guy named Paul Abrelay.
Okay.
His last name is Abrelat. So I was joking quite a bit about hyphenating and be Talasic Abrelay, so that way I have two really difficult last names.
Right. Really help people out when they look at you and try to pronounce your name and just give up.
Make it twice as hard.
That's funny.
So anyway.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, over the years of knowing you, I'm surprised that we haven't talked about you being involved with that song. I couldn't help myself just because that song did really well.
Yeah, it did.
It was on the Billboard charts, and that's really cool that you have that.
It's unusual, right? At the time, I was so excited. I just didn't really understand the gravity of how that just doesn't happen for most people. That just doesn't happen. And, but there are some interesting stories with all that. Moving out to LA, and I didn't really have a team in place at all. So there was a lot of things that, I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to deal with any of that.
Now, you mentioned, moving to LA, and now you are back in Atlanta.
Yeah, I moved here in 2014.
And you have this very sweet Southern personality, and you lived for 24, almost 25 years in LA. Do you feel more comfortable in the South or in LA, or was there one place you preferred particularly?
Well, I feel like I actually figured out who I was in LA.
Okay.
I felt very comfortable there. Once I got to a point where I could sustain myself financially, because LA is a very hard place to live if you're moving there and you don't have any connections and you don't have any income. It's expensive, and it's hard to make friends. It's hard to make friends. And, or at least at that time when I moved there, I think it was right at the end of an era of LA that, the end of the 80s. There was kind of a crazy rock scene happening that I don't know. I think it was kind of, there was some good things happening. There were some really beautiful songwriting, folk performers, and all that stuff was going on with the Williams brothers and Victoria Williams and, Sarah Hickman, a lot of the Windham Hill artists, and all that kind of stuff was happening too. But rock was kind of at a place where it was, I don't know, it was kind of spent at the time. And so when I moved to LA, that's when grunge really was just starting to hit.
Okay.
And, so then there was a whole nother, a whole different, wave of energy that was coming in. But, just back to moving, it's tough. It's hard to, relocate. It's hard for anyone. Anytime you move to a new city, you have to make new connections and make new friends and new sources of income and all those things. So, as far as me, but when I moved to Georgia, I should say Atlanta. Atlanta is a very metropolitan city. It's extremely diverse. And to me, it definitely is it's the LA. People here call it the Austin of the South.
Okay.
So kind of like Austin, and so it's the LA of Georgia for sure. So it's just a smaller scale. And, I feel comfortable here, and, I don't know. I think I feel okay wherever. It's all good.
Good.
Yeah.
well, we miss you out here, but I know, I'm glad you love it out there. And, I was lucky you were able to, when you were coming out to visit, to see in person for a few days to work on the album. So that was fun to get to see you.
Oh, that was so much fun. Your music has been so much fun to work on over the years. I just have to say that since I have you on, we're talking, so I have to tell you that.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. You're really fun to work with because you're, I feel like you genuinely like the songs and like working on them. And so that's kind of fun for me to have someone that's like, oh, cool, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then you're very easy to work with because you're all about the song and what the song needs. And it's not like, oh, I just want to do my part. And so that's fun. And then you're just really fantastic at what you do. So then it all comes together well. And yeah, it's been a blast.
Nice. Well, it is. And you know, what you just said is the most important thing, I think, is serving the song. And I think that's really where people go, you know, astray in the recording studio, or, you know, when they go off track, you know what I mean? And that's okay too, because sometimes you have to explore, but you know, it's always about trying to serve the song.
The Spanish painter Joan Miro once said, "You can look at a picture for a week and then never think of it again. You can also look at a picture for just a second and think of it all of your life." I love Deb's story of being immediately taken by the sounds of music at such a young age. Those first notes on the piano, lifting her someplace new and setting her on a path and a life in music. It's inspiring, reflecting on how those chords that Deb heard come to everyone at different times and at different ways. A new job promotion, a new love, parenthood, career change, and on and on. And how hearing those piano chords in our lives opens and expands the world into something much bigger and grander than we had felt perhaps just even a moment before. I remember learning to strum the first few chords of a guitar and hearing the endless possibilities of songs stirring and aching to be discovered. And ultimately, like Deb has explained and continues to do in her career, the beauty of creating, no matter what it is that it colors our lives and the lives of those we touch. Continually striving to create that song, that new business, reach for the things just beyond our grasp, is a reward all of its own. As the writer Neil Gaiman once said, "The world always seems brighter when you've just made something that wasn't there before." Deb, what do you feel are some of the best investments that you've made so far in your career?
Well, moving to Los Angeles, that was expensive. And, you know, it was a difficult thing to do, but it was also one of the best things I've ever done. And then I got involved in digital recording very, very early on. I was an early adapter of that. Me and another couple of musicians, we went in together and purchased, it was called Session 8. It was made by DigiDesign. And we, you know, went through all the hard knocks of computer crashes and all that. But it was a great thing to get in on early. And it was, it was expensive. It took a long time for us to pay it off, but that was a really good thing to do. I've always tried to be very frugal with my spending because it's easy to spend, too much or a lot of money, on your art and especially with recording. But I spent a lot of time researching, equipment, and I found a microphone that I love using on my voice, and it actually wasn't horribly expensive. They've gone up now, I think, because they've been popular, but buying a good microphone was huge. It was very important to find the right mic for my voice.
And what mic was that?
The one that I found and the one that I used on some of your tracks, it's made by a boutique microphone company called ADK.
Okay.
And I have the Hamburg, which is supposed to be kind of like a Neumann. It has a nice, warm sound. It's good. It works well for me with my voice.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I've, as a singer, that's so huge, and people maybe don't think about that. It's like it does make a difference, the kind of microphone that you use.
It makes a huge difference. It's the same as a guitarist, finding the right guitar and the right sounds and the right amp and all those things. A singer has to find the right microphone and preamps that work with their voice. And,
sure.
You don't always get a choice. If you're going to sing at somebody else's studio, you're relying on the expertise of the studio owner, engineer, knowing just what your voice sounds like and what they have in their arsenal that's going to work.
Right. So kind of on that same line of thinking, when you take this ADK, is it just for the studio, or do you use it when you sing live? Is there a version for both?
No, it's a condenser microphone, so you would only use that in the studio. So, live, I've just always used a Shure Beta 58. And,
okay.
I think there's probably, there's been a lot of really great technologies that have come out, and developments and microphones. And it's always good to revisit and see what else is out there. So maybe it's time for me to do that.
Yeah.
Yay.
Now, it sounds like technology has really kind of helped in your career. Is that true, as far as just the updates to how you can record from home, and you can work out of your own home office and do that? Have you seen that and felt that help over the last 15, 20 years of your career?
Well, I've really felt it over the last 5.
Okay.
It's been because, everything has kind of come together really in the last 10 years, with, things like Dropbox and, the ability to upload large files, and send them to people. And, one of the last collaborations I did was with an artist who lives in Sweden. So,
wow.
That wouldn't have been possible, 10 years ago. And
right.
so I would say really in the last, maybe 7 or 8 years, that's when it's really become much easier for artists to collaborate, and people
sure.
at all levels, that's the thing that's so wonderful about it. But, I think technology in general, I think it's definitely a plus. I think that people sometimes rely too much on that and not on just their own, being able to play all by themselves in a room, right. Without the aid of any technology. You're on an acoustic instrument by yourself making a song. I think that there's really no substitute for that. But a musician who has, the technology that we have now is incredible for all of us to be able to make recordings that sound great now, that we just couldn't do that 20 years ago. So
yeah, and you're right about finding that kind of balance between making something and having that great acoustic or vocal performance sound as natural as possible, when at the same time you have at your disposal all of these great new gadgets and gear that can make you sound however you want. And I think the really great artists and producers and engineers like Sean is great at this, at finding that balance between using what's at hand, but also keeping it true to form.
Right. Well, and the thing is, when you start with, a good performance, then the technology is there. It can help. It can only make it better unless, you
right.
go down that rabbit hole, right? Like you were saying. Right. So, yeah.
Did you ever think about a different career?
I have thought about that so many times in my life. Mainly because, it's difficult to make I don't want to say it's difficult to make a living. I've been able to make a living, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to do what I've been able to do. And, a lot of it has been because I'm a teacher too. I always express that for me, teaching is like a second. My favorite thing in life is performing and writing. But, you just don't always have those opportunities. So you have to be able to supplement your income. And right. I'm really glad that I fell into teaching. I mean, it really just kind of happened. And I really, it was so rewarding on so many other levels, not just financial. So, I always call that my second. I enjoy doing it. But even beyond that, yeah, I've considered other things. I think I have a lot of different types of skills, and I've thought about it, but it's hard to think of not doing music.
And I think like you said, you've been fortunate to be able to kind of have a second career teaching, but it's also still in the vein of doing what you love, teaching piano or music or whatnot. And, yeah, I know, I'm 10 years in, and I look back and think, at the time when you're making decisions about stuff, and, just in my first 10 years, I've seen so many people that have kind of started and stopped very quickly because the first 2 or 3 years, it's just so tough to really do it. And I'm sure your career have seen quite a few of those as well. I want to kind of pivot to what you're going to do next. So I know you're working on some of your own stuff, and read that you're planning on doing a series of EPs in 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the plan. I have so many songs that have either just been demoed or not really completely. They've been performed and they've been written, but not necessarily recorded. It's so funny. I spend a lot of time working on other people's music and not as much time on myself. And so that's one of the goals for me this year, is to try to allow myself a little bit more time for me so that I can make my own art too. And, that it's very rewarding to work on other people's music, but I would like to do this. I would like to put out some songs of my own. And I've written many different types. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
There are a few different styles happening in there. I think, I guess the vein would have to be adult alternative.
Okay.
Singer-songwriter adult alternative would be the thing. But, I like playing around with, electronic music, and I have a jazz background. So my songwriting, and a lot of people say that my songs, I sound like I stepped right out of the 70s, with my music. So It's a weird little mix. So it'll be interesting. And that's the reason why I want to do the EPs, because I'd like to just group songs that play well together,
Sure.
together. And, I'm playing around with how to do that. But, I think that's the best approach. And then that way it's not this huge thing that I have to, give birth to. It's be more like I'm doing this little set and then I can work on that and get it done. And it'll be easier, but they're bite-sized chunks,
Yes. Oh yes. I've thought long and hard about, my next move being some more in the EP, because after this 16 song monster, I would look forward to a smaller chunk of music.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to do. Whew. That's a feat. Yeah. So
it was. I'm glad I did it, but yeah, I think about and I see the valuableness of a smaller size, and you can really, like you said, do something that is more manageable, and also that they stick together in kind of a smaller setting. And I look forward to hearing what you put out. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And I really, one of the things I want to do is I really want to call back all these different wonderful musicians I've worked with over the years and have them work with me on this. So, yeah, so we'll see how it all goes, but, I think it'll be fun, and, just try to keep it as, just go for the art of it and not worry about the outcome of it as much as the process, right. and just try to, make some art.
Sure. When you look back on your career at this point, if you could give, 20-year-old Deb advice that now, what would that be?
Oh, deep sigh. There are so many things I would tell 20-year-old Deb.
Musically, maybe.
I think the thing is that musically, I always felt good, but I didn't always trust myself.
Mm.
And I think that a lot of it was fear. And so I think that there were a lot of opportunities that I missed because of that.
Always an interesting question, I guess, to think about. And I know the people that listen to this podcast that are, maybe on the younger side or trying to figure out a career, and whatever it is, it's kind of nice to hear what other people have gone through and where they're going. And so I appreciate you thinking about that question. Books. I like to end with asking about some books, and if you have any that you could recommend that have been impactful in your life.
Yes. Well, on that same subject of fear, one of the best books I ever read, and it helped me a lot, it's a book called Love is Letting Go of Fear. And it's written by Gerald Jampolsky, and it's based on Marianne Williams' book, A Course in Miracles. So basically it distills this gigantic book down into a very easy to digest, simple form. It's like it takes profound emotions and just boils it down to very simple, just two emotions. Like everything you feel can all be boiled down to either love or fear. So, it's an interesting way of looking at yourself, and it's very freeing when you, that I found that book that very, very, very helpful for me. And, what was another good one? I liked, I think it was called The Illusionist. Is that the one by Richard Bach?
There was a movie.
Is that what it
The
was?
Illusionist. Is that her book too?
I think I'm saying it wrong. It was the Reluctant Messiah. I can't remember the name of the title, but another book of his that I really liked. It's actually kind of a kid's book, but Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's the same thing. It's like, being true to who you are. And I think that's kind of a thing for me. I think that,
yeah.
It was a big reason why I ended up moving to LA. I just didn't feel like I was able to figure out who I was when I lived in Dallas.
Sure.
And I had to kind of break away and figure it all out on my own. And so those are two books that I think were pretty profound for me. And they're basic, but they are just so, all encompassing and,
yep.
They're profound too. So
they are. I remember reading the Jonathan Livingston Seagull when I was younger, and that had a big impact on me. And funny you bring that up because I haven't thought about that book in years. And it's simple, but you're right. It's a great read, very fast read.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah.
So I wish I could remember the name of the other book of his because I thought it was good too. But I think Jonathan Livingston Seagull is probably
great.
The best,
Yeah. Well, Deb,
I should read that again.
I'm so glad you came on this morning, and just on a personal note, I appreciate you just talking about your life and the ins and outs of it. And I think it's it's so interesting to hear how you connect from one point to the other and how life takes you on these winding paths. And then I'm just really glad that your path and my path crossed, 6 or 7 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and that we've been able to work together. And you've
mm-hmm.
you might not even realize how much you've done for my music, and how great you've made so many of my songs sound and how much you've added to it. And so thank you for that, and thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Well, it's been a joy to do your music. I tell you, really, seriously, it's a joy to do your stuff. You write beautiful songs, and I loved hearing the little sampler that you put out for the new album. I was listening to some of the mixes and I was like, oh yes, I can't wait. I cannot wait to hear it.
Thank you, Deb.
So, but maybe not too long down the line, I'm going to have you sing with me.
You just let me know. I'll do it. I'd love to.
I would love that.
Good. Well, Deb, before we go, I will leave you with the last word. So is there anything else, before we end the podcast today?
I think my main theme with people is just, let go of that fear and just try, that's all we can really do. Let's just give it our best, give it a good shot and have fun. And that's really kind of where I'm at this point, not letting the echo chamber of social media eat you alive, and just, try to make some art.
We really thank Deb for coming on and sharing her story. And to end the podcast, we're going to hear a song off the new record called Baby's Got the Blues that heavily features Deb's wonderful vocals. See you next time.
Someday will I see a deeper part of love in me, in the moonlight as it circles your eyes. And if I ever know, the art of letting go, I think I'd hold you against me in the night and make it right. And no, my baby's got the blues. She headed downtown in the rain. And no, I got too much to lose. She headed downtown yesterday. Never just the same, moving slowly on a train, climbing higher through the quiet of the night. Clocks upon the wall, and the changing leaves of fall will remind me that I'm growing old. I hope closer. No, no, my baby's got the blues. She headed downtown in the rain. And oh no, I got too much to lose. She headed downtown yesterday. Someday one of us must go, as we headed downtown yesterday.